Hi everyone. So welcome to our first episode of our series. Okay. So we have a very special guest, Youngbee Dale, with us today, and she works. She's the CEO of Dell Consulting, and she has more than 15 years of experience, and she has worked with a White House initiative on Asian American Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders as well. So, welcome, Youngvi, and thanks for being here, giving us your valuable time. Okay. So, can you would you please tell us about you and how did you come into this field and all that stuff?
So I started as a human work in the anti-trafficking field in 2005. I started as at a nonprofit in South Korea, and then I moved to then I came back to the state, and after the internship with the human rights group. At that time, the UN and the U.S. Government been raising awareness of trafficking, so that was really our focus, I didn't really know what trafficking was at the time. I ended up working with a lot of trafficking victims, and that was my first entry towards the anti-trafficking field. But then when I came to the U.S. and I came back to the U.S. and I attended a grad school, and then my professor at grad school was very passionate about trafficking, and I was more passionate about financial crime. So I told her, but she kind of like talked me into writing a publication with her, and contributing a chapter to her publication. And I did all the research into financial crime. So what am I going to do with the trafficking, right? So I just said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to find something, right? So what I found a nexus between human trafficking and the global routes as opposed to money laundering policy. And basically I found out that the trafficking network and the different organized criminals are using different routes to exploit the victims. And these transition countries are focused on the ones with the weak money laundering policies. So that really became my sort of like a first publication. And then afterwards, starting 2009, 2010, I actually ended up working in the US anti-trafficking field, and I didn't really focus on the financial crime until maybe like 2016. Prior to that, I thought that there was a gap between what I see, and I speak Korean, obviously. So I was born and raised in South Korea, and I moved to the States. And
Oh, okay.
was what I read about trafficking activity in Korean language was a very different from what I'm reading in English. So I just kind of wanted to find out what is the gap, how do I bridge the gap, right? So I ended up talking to 3 different experts in the field, and they said that, well, they didn't know anything about it because they're all Americans. And they said, well, you should write about it. Otherwise, people are going to steal your idea. So that became first publication. And then while I was writing first publication on Beyond Massage Parlor, which focused on Korean sex trafficking market, and I realized that the traffickers are using not just exploiting the individual victims, but while to exploit the individual, they have to run the entire corporation, like business, right? So that business model include money laundering, tax evasion, visa fraud, and all the other that aspect of illicit activities that are supporting the trafficking activities. So I just thought, if the Koreans are committing a crime, there has to be Chinese are committing a crime, right? Then the Americans are committing a crime. There has to be, everybody has to commit a crime, the finance crime, right? Because you have to hide the illicit money. So that became my second publication, that uncovering all the different anti-money laundering, no, not anti-money laundering method that are used by different trafficking or brothel models operating in the United States.
Okay, thank you for that. And your story, entire story is very interesting. Our audience is gonna really gonna love your story, how you came into this industry, and now how you have published 2 publications and all that stuff. So it is really good to know that people like you are working hard in this industry to fight these crimes and all that stuff. So going further, I would like to know, like, to set a foundation, could you please explain what constitutes human trafficking and its various forms?
Say that again.
Uh, to set a foundation for our audience, I would like to tell you that could you please explain what constitutes human trafficking and its various forms?
So human trafficking is a modern day slavery where the criminals are exploiting victims using force, fraud, and coercion. But when it comes to minor trafficking, children that are being exploited, at least in the United States and also UN protocol, that you don't need to involve the evidence of force, fraud, or coercion. As long as the minors are being exploited through commercial sex, whether it's pornography or prostitution or strip club or anything that has to do with commercial sexual exploitation, that these minors are considered as trafficking victims. Now there are labor trafficking that I'm not as savvy as sex trafficking at this point, but labor trafficking also is the using the same method of exploitation, force, fraud, coercion, and then the victims are coerced into the forced labor, such as domestic servitude, or working in a restaurant, or working at the farm or a fishery. And there are many aspects of a force, fraud, coercion that can be used to exploit the victims.
So basically, I came across with while I was researching about these human trafficking, I came across with various cases where most of the people are part of victims of labor trafficking. And in your study, as per your study, what would you tell? What part of region, what part of the world, is famous for this labor trafficking? I came across with this thing that this labor trafficking it mostly comes in Middle East region of the world. So is that true?
So I get as I said, I am not the foremost authority when it comes to labor trafficking. However, I can speak about labor trafficking issue within the commercial sex market. So a lot of people don't realize that when the victims are coerced into criminal activities, in other words, the victims are coerced into operating brothel or sometimes stealing or robbery. And there are a lot of criminal activities that the traffickers use victims to commit. Money laundering is another one. Money muling and whatnot. So these are considered as labor trafficking within the commercial sex industry. Now, if that is the case, and probably North America and very specifically the United States, is that if that's how I don't know if that's how it is in all the other parts of the world, but I can tell you that that is also the case in the East Asia based on my conversation with the criminals.
Okay, got it. So let's discuss the interconnection between human trafficking and money laundering. How do these two illicit activities often overlap or facilitate each other?
So human trafficking is illicit activity. So whenever a criminal commits a crime and profit off of committing a crime, they have to commit a money laundering. Money laundering is the process where the criminal conceals, conceal, same word, and or reinvest, right? Or the process of the money laundering involves an all three activity, right?
Turning dirty money into clean money, yeah.
Right. So because the traffickers are criminals, they have to commit money laundering. So the way they commit money laundering, based on my study, are all different because they're all from the different region, at least in the United States. There are all different they use a different criminal culture and business culture that they used to. For instance, if a criminal is from China, they rely on WeChat as a popular method to recruit the victims, or to speak to the victims or whatnot. But if you're looking into the labor trafficking victims or some of the drug traffickers that are operating in the Hispanic country, the WhatsApp is more popular method rather than WeChat. So they all use different method in terms of criminality, and that goes to their money laundering method as well.
Okay. And like you said, they need to clean this money, dirty money into the white, like I won't say white money, but it is a clean money. It should look clean to government or anything, this institutions or regulatory bodies. So what kind of, like, when they conduct business, they must open this, they must be opening this business under the front companies or shell companies, right? So they, what are the payment methods, like prepaid cards or credit cards? How does that thing work in this payment thing?
So based on my study, I think a lot of Chinese massage parlors prefer cash only business. So bulk cash, carrying a bulk cash, it's really not a taboo subject when you go to remote areas in China, as opposed to if you go to Beijing and Hong Kong, they're very used to utilizing payment method like, prepaid card, or like, I don't know, like a Bitcoin or smartphone app or whatnot. But when you go to remote China, where the most trafficking victims are from, the primary method of the payment is still very much a cash only. Well, what's surprising is when I was talking with one of the expert in the Yakuza in Japan, that Japan is the same way. If you bring the suitcase of bulk cash to anywhere, nobody will question. That's, like if you do that in the United States, everybody will call the cop. That's just like, that's weird, right? That's shady, right? But in some parts of the world, like East Asia, bulk cash is very much a normal process of transaction method. So Chinese victims are very much used to that. Now, Korean victim, however, even though they're from the similar region of the not United States, the world, that the Korean victim prefer credit card rather than cash. That's not to say they're not using cash. In my study, there are maybe 34% of the brothels are accepting credit card as a payment method, rather than as opposed to Chinese and Hispanic brothels are accepting full cash only, or primarily cash for the transaction method.
Okay. So, like you said, there are various businesses used as a front companies for conducting these brothels and all, maintaining these businesses. So, like, what type of businesses these fraudsters or these people use, like salons, this massage centers, and all that stuff. So, can you tell us more about it?
So when it comes to shell corporation or front company or shelf corporation, I didn't find a whole lot of front companies, so to speak, when it comes to Tanancingo brothel that are that's based in Mexico, Tanancingo. So Tanancingo brothel is where the trafficker brings the victims to the U.S. to exploit through commercial sex, and for the Tanancingo traffickers, they're not using shell corporation to hide their business. They'll make the cash and they'll just send it over to their their home country through Western Union, right? They love Western Union. Now, when it comes to when it comes to Chinese and Koreans, they're very savvy about utilizing shell corporations. So for instance, their popular shell corporation or fund company are sometimes a grocery store. Sometimes they have, they have a private bank to help these traffickers process the payment for the real estate purchase. And sometimes they utilize casinos. There are a lot of the traffickers from China will use a property management company or investment bank or investment not necessarily a bank, but like some sort of like XYZ investment and whatnot. So those are the preferred shell corporation type that they use. And also seen but when you go into a little more deeper into their trafficking or money laundering method, deeper you get into the market, that they utilize a more sophisticated method to move the money. So these will include, some of the, accountants who are helping them to, do the trade-based money laundering. at the method. So there's just like there's a lot of variation of what they do in terms of moving the money transnationally.
So basically, any investigator looking after these cases, like they are suspicious about this case. So what kind of red flags you generally look for as an investigator, like red flags of human trafficking and money laundering? So can you tell? Yeah.
So this is very complicated question to answer because all traffickers use different methods. So I can give you an example of let's talk about Chinese. So Chinese, I feel like is the most complicated organization, at least at this point. I could be wrong, but what I noticed about Chinese, at least in the United States and also London, Canada, they're using the same method they've been using for thousands. I would say, yeah, thousands years, right? And they're they love casinos. They love grocery store, Asian grocery store,
Oh,
and they also love a lot of like import and export companies that deal with Chinese businesses, right? And they also utilize travel agency or immigration firms to bring the victims or bringing the investor into the U.S. or Canada or even London and whatnot, right? So I think these are the main flags that if you run into travel agency, but they seems to be very not aligned with their normal trajectory of activities, you'll probably want to look into their customer the transaction activity a little deeper and or do your investigation a little deeper. If you see an immigration firm, but the guy or girl who's operating immigration firm doesn't necessarily have a license to operate immigration firm, but they have like a real estate broker firm, or they have trade-based export import company that are open and closed, but they're really their names are sort of like their transaction method and names or either or are related to the Chinese market, then chances are you might want to look in deeper into these customers.
got it, got it. And from your experience, what are the main challenges faced by law enforcement agencies and organizations when investigating any and prosecuting these cases?
So I think that for me, I can only speak from my experience working with the law enforcement and in the U.S. And I think the biggest challenge is that I don't know how it is in other countries, but like it's some of the law enforcement said like it's hard to read some of the SARS report, suspicious activity report written by the compliance officer or by a financial institution, right? Like they cannot recognize that what okay, you're saying a lot of things, but like it makes no sense, right? So that it'll really help if the compliance officer or the financial institution understand the reality of the market as opposed to trying to figure out kind of grabbing different random evidence and trying to make sense and making a lot of assumption, right? So I think that's one challenge. The other thing is when I'm talking to investigators, law enforcement, or even like the compliance officer, I think that because we have such a diverse population that are very active in the commercial sex market in the United States, and I think it's the same, goes with Australia and some of the Asian countries that are the trafficking victims are very exploited, even though their primary population is very homogenous. Like Japan has a lot of victims from Russia. They have victims from some of the Hispanic country. They have obviously victims of their own people, or Japanese women, or South Korean, or Chinese. They all use different methods. But there are challenges that you run into if you don't speak the language or you're not familiar with their culture. Then there's, chances are there you can only do so much to figure out the criminal intent and the predicting the criminal activities, so that what's coming ahead and how to set up the red flags or the understand the suspicious activities. So I think that's the two of the big more of the bigger challenges that I see.
Yeah. So basically, for investigating these matters, this system, this thing starts from transaction monitoring only, right? So as a compliance officer, they see any suspicious transaction, then this SAR or STR gets filed. Then they investigate this matter thoroughly, and then they come up with the solution, or like come up with the evidence that this human trafficking is happening at this salon or whatever, this through account, this money is being channeled through someone through this account. I hope that is the thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So basically, you are in this industry for more than 15 years, and you must have come across with a lot of cases while investigating. So can you tell us the real life examples, like how did you investigate one particular case and all that?
Well, I can tell you about my perspective as an expert witness. So there's one case that I worked on. I gotta pick and choose which case that I.
You have a lot of cases.
Yeah, there's one case that I worked on as an expert witness. It was a military court case, and it involved the potential Yakuza affiliated organization. So what I noticed about the Yakuza, as opposed to Chinese or Korean or Russian or Hispanic trafficking organization, is that the Yakuza loves to exploit the Filipino victims for either sex or labor, right? Yakuza is heavily present in Palau Island, and where the case was based in Palau. And then when the attorneys in general, they come to me with this much information and ask me that, can you prove this is a labor or sex trafficking? I mean, like, what did the victim say? They were exploited? Did the victim say they were, their force, fraud, or coercion have been used, right? Like, there is no tangible evidence in terms of like the victim has been exploited, right? So, I mean, she was exploited, but because she's Filipina and I'm Korean and the attorney is American, it's just really hard to figure out, like, number one, there's like a cultural barrier. Number two, there's psychological barrier that it was just, even if the victim is willing to testify, it was really hard to figure out the extract the element of human trafficking. So what I focused on was the financial aspect of the Yakuza organization. So what I noticed is that their business model, using hotel and travel agency industry in Palau from the Philippines to traffic the victims. That's one element that I focus on. The other element that I've focused on was the tax evasion method that were used by the U.S. citizen who was supporting the Yakuza affiliate. And the other thing is that the Yakuza individual used to own a nightclub, which is essentially, in Japan, if you operate a nightclub, chances are you're part of Yakuza. And talking with the expert from Japan, they all knew that that particular individual is Yakuza member. So all these evidence are gathering together, where I'm building more like a business model to submit it to the court, as opposed to traditionally in the US, at least, that we've been solely reliant or primarily reliant on the victim's testimony. So knowing what I know about the market, and I kind of explained the overall Yakuza operation that are different from other types of trafficking organization, that really helped me help the attorney win the case.
Okay, that was so amazing. Like, you must be having a lot of cases. You must have investigated a lot of cases and acted as a expert testimony or an expert witness in a lot of cases. So, as per your opinion, like, what are some not opinion, I would say, what are some notable international collaborations, or I would say initiatives aimed at addressing this human trafficking and money laundering?
So what are the initiatives that I'm aware of? I know that there's the Global Coalition against Human Trafficking, Financial Global Coalition. It's got the acronym, but Luke Raven from Australia is part of the coalition, and I will also be part of the working group. And they're working. This is the initiative that are of the AML professionals and the subject matter expert and the anti-trafficking field are coming together to figure out, okay, this is what they're doing globally. The criminals are actively, trafficking these victims or whatnot. But what can we do as AML professionals and anti-trafficking expert or professional to work together to bring the justice against the traffickers? So I will say that's one initiative or primary initiative that I am aware of.
Okay. So, when you investigate, you must have came across with a lot of victims, this human trafficking victims, I hope. So, what were their reaction? Are most of the audience is from India? Like most of the audience is from India. So, in India, these things are looked as taboo, I would say. So they are not so aware about how do they these things don't really come out so easily, and people don't talk you comfortably about these situations. If someone is a part of this human trafficking, they don't really discuss what they feel, how they were treated. So as per your opinion, you might have came across with a lot of people who were the victim of this human trafficking thing. So what was their reaction and all that stuff? Like, what did they say? How things went for them and all?
So what I'm advocating is that they rely on the financial criminal data instead of relying on victim's testimony. If victim doesn't want to testify, she doesn't have to testify, or he doesn't have to testify, right? But the problem is that if you don't put the bad guys away by using different methods, that bad guy is going to turn around and exploit more victims. So until he or she goes to jail, just because you rescue one or two victims in front of you, it doesn't mean that that person is going to stop their criminal activities, right? So instead of relying on the victim's testimony, because I guarantee it's not just Indian survivors that are now willing to come forward. There are a lot of other survivors around the world who are not really willing to come forward, solely because that's commercial sex especially is a very taboo subject. I can tell you that's one of the reasons why we have such a low conviction rate when it comes to international victims comparing to Western victims in the US at least. So I think that understand the trafficking business model and also their money laundering and tax evasion method is very helpful when it comes to going after these bad guys.
Got it. So normally in India, there are very I've never came across with such things, but actually in India, there are no massage centers or the way this brothel system works in US or Western countries or Europe. So these things doesn't really work actually. There are some massage centers, and there must be massage centers in India who are front business, show as a front business, but in inside they are maintaining these brothels and all that stuff. So how does these things are different from India? And can you give us the comparison between Indian and other Canada, USA, Western countries? Okay, how these things work?
So so cases that I came across that involve Indian victims in the U.S. at least are the celebrity from not the Bollywood. There's another entertainment sector I can't remember, but it's Telugu entertainment industry. So there are famous, So there are famous or young celebrities that have been trafficked through the cultural exchange visa or the program whatnot. So I think these victims are brought into the U.S. With a fraudulent visa through this nonprofit operated by other Indian American traffickers. And there are only one or two incidents that the cases that I'm aware of when it comes to Indian. Now, in the U.S., there are all types. There are many other ways that the traffickers from the different countries are exploiting the victims. When it comes to Korean or Chinese, there's a karaoke bar, there's a room salon, hostess bar, there's a massage parlor, there's an indoor brothel called, GF, girlfriend experience brothel, right? And then there's when it comes to Western or U.S. citizen trafficking organization, we have a social media trafficking activities, the exploitation through social media, online escort services. We have strip club, we have massage parlor exploiting U.S. citizens, and we also have the Hispanic brothels that are exploiting Hispanic women and men through either Tana single model or the cantinas, which is the Hispanic bar that are operating in the U.S. In conjunction to prostitution or commercial sexual activity. So we have a very diverse types of commercial sexual services that are exploiting or have been exploited sex trafficking victims, as opposed to, I know that if you go to other parts of the world, that's really not the case, so to speak.
Okay, got it. So that's it from my end, and I hope this was a very fruitful session for our audience. Yes, and yes, thank you for your time, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.